Welcome to the Real Business Lifetime Lessons podcast, where Carolina business leaders get real about growth, grit, and leadership. Today's guest is Joy Dixon. Joy is the co-founder of MainVine, a boutique wine distribution company based in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. With more than 20 years of experience in the hospitality and wine industries, Joy has built a business founded on relationships, legacy, and community. In this episode, she shares how her passion for small towns, family owned vineyards, and thoughtful hospitality led her to create a company that connects people through wine and purpose. Welcome to the podcast, Joy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Joy, can you tell us how your early career in hospitality shaped your approach to the wine industry?
Wine has always been an integral part of every part of hospitality for me, from the wine education portion to serving it at the tables and building out programs for properties along the way.
When you and I first spoke during our intro call, you mentioned discovering wine on a college trip to France. What about that experience stayed with you?
Growing up in Kings Mountain, I grew up in a family that doesn't drink and still doesn't drink for the most part, in a county that did not serve alcohol by the drink until I was well above drinking age. So, alcohol in general and wine specifically was not something that I had any exposure to growing up. And it wasn't until I took a summer college study trip to France that I had my first experience with wine. And it really was life changing and changed my career path because at that point I was studying for something completely different. My parents thought I was going to be a teacher, but I thought I was going to take over the CIA from the inside. It was a completely different career path. And that trip and understanding and experiencing wine in that way in France is what set the tone for the career that I have now.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And it's so funny how things change from what we think we're going to do in college to where we 20 plus years later.
It's kind of unfair to ask someone at 18 or 19 to define what they're going to do and what they're going to be in their 30s and 40s. So I think we have to be graceful with ourselves.
What inspired you to launch MainVine, and how did you and your business partner decide to take the leap?
Both my business partner and I grew up in North Carolina, me in Kings Mountain, and Keith in Charlotte, and spent 20 years not here. So we spent 20 years traveling and working careers in other places. And both of us moved back here during COVID. We were connected through a mutual friend group, and both of us had a background in wine brands and hospitality branding, and had brands that we had been working with for years that we were passionate about finding a place for and finding a way to get them into North Carolina, continue working with them as we were looking for post-COVID lifestyle changes. And so the idea came about, why not launch MainVine to give these brands a home and to be able to continue the work that we had been doing with these brands and get them exposure, to market that we really felt would appreciate the effort that they put into making their product.
How does MainVine differ from larger distributors in how you work with family owned vineyards?
You mentioned that we are a boutique vineyard or boutique distributor, and like our clearest definition of boutique is that we only work with family owned properties. We don't work with any corporately owned property. Everything is multi-generation family production. And that's a big shift from a lot of the distributors that you see in the market today. The biggest differentiation between how we go to market and how a big distributor goes to market is that we don't deal in any retail. You won't find you won't find any wines that we represent on a Harris Teeter shelf or a Food Lion shelf or Target or Total Wine or any of those things, because we are dealing with family owned vineyards that are quite small productions where everybody's working 14 jobs. This is truly a craft and something that's been passed down through generations. And we want to make sure that we're taking those wines and that craft from these artisans to market in a way that's reflective of that. They're also not producing in quantities that are large enough to supply a grocery store shelf because they just don't have the capability as a family owned property, and typically a small family owned property, to produce the type of volume that would be needed to supply a retail situation. That's a big difference between a lot of the distributors that you see working in North Carolina and across the wine market in general, and how we choose to approach things.
Especially launching during COVID, but amongst other things, what were some of the biggest regulatory and logistical challenges you faced in your first year, and how did you navigate them?
North Carolina is what is considered a control state, and there are only a handful of those that exist in the alcohol industry in the United States at this point. That makes North Carolina unique because we have extra layers of regulations that a lot of states don't have to consider, and business in general doesn't have to consider some of the things that we have to consider from a regulatory fashion. It's not as easy as finding the warehouse that's the right size for you and going to rent that warehouse. It involves multiple layers, 4 to 5 different types of inspections that include zoning and fire marshals and um, um, all types of government agencies that have to sign off to make sure that you're not close to schools because you're storing alcohol, and that you're going to be delivering inflammable products, so that you have all the different types of training involved. Finding a space where you can actually operate is probably the biggest drawback and the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome. For us, it took 3 rounds of warehousing until we were able to find a warehouse that met all the restrictions that all of the inspectors would sign off on the same time. And that's before you even reach into the layers of all of ABC. When you get into Raleigh, that's just to get your space secure. That's not counting the fingerprinting and the background checks and all of the things that you have to go through with a control state and ABC. It's great for us. It offers us a lot of protection once we're actually open and running, but it is a huge hurdle to getting started because it takes a while to navigate.
Why was it important to you to bring MainVine's home base to your hometown?
Initially, MainVine's home base was not intended to be in my hometown. We had initially decided to have our home base be in Charlotte due to the proximity to accounts, making it very easy for us to serve our customers and be very hands-on. And we talked about those regulatory issues that you face and the challenges that you face going through that. And when we had the second failure of warehouses not passing inspection, we really got to thinking about it. What type of small business network do we have access to? And you don't have a stronger small business network than in a hometown and in a small town. We found out at 2 o'clock on a Thursday that the fire marshal wasn't going to do our final inspection that we needed done by Thursday morning to get our licensing complete in Raleigh. And we're absolutely panicking at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. So my first call was to my mom, who is a small business owner in my hometown. And I'm like, Mom, who do we know? I need a realtor. I need a warehouse. We need 6,000 to 10,000 square feet. These are the things that it has to have. And it really highlighted that we'd made the right choice, because that small hometown network of small businesses, realtors, independent property owners really rallied around us, and things that had taken us months to accomplish in a larger city were done in days in this small town. We were very happy to have had it turn out the way that it did, and to be able to bring the jobs that we're creating, the exposure that we're creating for the industry, and just how the industry works into my hometown. So it was a happy accident that it ended up in Kings Mountain.
I feel that a little bit too. There's things that, because my agency is right outside of the city of Columbia, right across the river, next county over, but because it's a smaller town that the agency is located in, there's things I can just get done by picking up the phone and calling the city hall that I would never be able to do across the river there. You can be more nimble when you're working with a smaller community at times. When you and I chatted before, you described MainVine as an ambassador, not just a distributor. How does that mindset shape how you build your partnerships?
For us, they really are partnerships. We don't just sell wine. I mean, we do sell wine. That is our primary purpose. That's what provides income to us and allows us to pay payroll and taxes and all the good things. But when it comes to brand selection and the types of wines that we're going to represent, it's not just, is there a way to profit from this in the market? What is this story? And how does this family that owns this property want to see their product and their life's work represented? We have direct relationships with all of our producers. There's not a single winemaker in our book that I don't have their direct number in my cell phone, and I can call and talk about what's happening, talk about what's happening in the field as the vines are growing. And so we know what's coming years down the road. We spend a lot of time in direct conversation with them, visiting properties, spending time in the vineyards, in the wineries, in the cellars, so that we understand what their vision is. And I think that's the biggest distinction between us just being a distributor. We're not just the people that get it on the shelf. We understand and take the time to understand how this is a part of their life and how they want their story told. And I think that makes us more ambassadors than distributors. Family owned properties start with the word family, right? And all families are slightly dysfunctional. So part of being that ambassador is sometimes being the mediator. In winemaker years, you don't celebrate anniversaries, you count your vintages. How many harvests have I been in? Like it's a big badge of honor to say 25 harvest or 35 harvest, because that's, it's much like a farming community. The passing of time and the counting of time is marked by harvest, because everything relies on having a good harvest. And so to take, a family member with 40, 50, 60 harvest, who is watching the trends change and not necessarily understanding how the trends are changing as far as buyer purchasing power, what type of expendable income people have, what types of products that they're looking for, and being able to translate what we need in the market to someone with 35 or 40 harvests to their grandchild or great grandchild, who's the first of the generation who's actually gone to school to learn how to do this and is coming back with all of these fancy scientific ways of making wine, that weren't just passed down through multi-generations. And they're ready to modernize. Like we're partners on both sides of that, because we're tasked with being that mediator between keeping the romance and the artistry and the tradition and the history of the older harvest generations alive through the storytelling and through understanding the history of the product, but also being able to modernize the industry so that it can be something that continues to grow and continues to stay healthy and alive for the younger and future generations.
What does preserving that local culture through wine and hospitality look like in actual practice?
It is a lot of storytelling, because that is what is unique about the wines that we represent, is that there's such a rich history there. And it would be very easy to just become very technical about it. When can you bottle it? When can you get it here? How much can we make for it on the shelf? And part of preserving the culture locally on the vineyard, but also sharing that and connecting that to our cultures here, because the rhythm of a vineyard, regardless of where it is something that North Carolina understands, because we're so agriculturally based, and the Southeast understands in a way that a lot of other regions that I've worked in don't. They just don't have that experience. You don't have that agricultural base to the local economy. Being able to share those stories and share those harvest stories, and having a sweet potato farmer from Eastern North Carolina, or or somebody that's growing blueberries in Western North Carolina, like understanding that the wine that's in this glass, like the farmer went through the same thing. This is just like they would go to farmers market, or just like they would struggle to get into a distributorship for restaurant supply. Farmers and winemakers have the same struggle. We are the go-between to transfer their culture and to transfer the richness of their culture, to our local market, and helping people understand that on both sides, because there's a lot of people in the wine world that don't understand how independent restaurant worlds work. And they don't understand that there are actually entire groups of restaurants out there that are really focused on that culture and being able to preserve that culture and to share that culture across their entire product lineup. It's not just about where does your beef come from and who's curing your bacon and making sure that your tomatoes are grown locally, but they do actually care about the wine and the beverages that they're serving having that same type of culture and heritage. That's where we really fit into that ambassadorship of making sure that we're sharing the culture behind the wines and the history behind the wines, and connecting that to what we're seeing in the hospitality market.
Shifting gears just a tiny bit, what's one business lesson you've learned this year that you would imagine other early stage entrepreneurs would need to hear?
I felt like a question like this would probably pop up. My business partner and I were talking about it, and if we could pass along something that we felt like we really didn't do well in the beginning, something that we've learned our lesson. We have absolutely learned our lesson now, and changed our focus on it. It's befriending our competition and befriending those people that are bigger than us, those people in the market that have a different purpose than us, because the beverage world is a very big world. The food and hospitality world is a very big world. We don't serve the same purpose that a larger distributor serves. And there are things that we can do that they can't do. When you open a business, you're doing it to fill a need and you're doing it to be different. I think sometimes we put ourselves in silos and isolate ourselves because you've got to make a name for yourself. You don't want to befriend your competition. You have to just make your mark, and you feel like you have to do that alone sometimes. And I think one of the things we learned very, very early on, especially when it came to regulatory issues and finding ways around those and logistics issues, was to very, very quickly make an incredibly strong friend group at businesses way bigger than you that you never want to be, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, especially in the same industry. But there are problems along the way that they can help with dramatically and can offer advice. And it happens in a collaborative spirit because you fill two different roles in the industry. And the right relationship in that type of position really leads to an all ships rise situation, because then the whole industry becomes stronger and everybody is just more successful.
I think there's value in knowing your spot in an industry and how you contribute to it, and that when the overall industry does well, we all have opportunities to win. You mentioned on our intro call that you and your business partner were very clear on your values and strengths before you launched. How has that impacted your working relationship?
I think that it's made a very healthy working relationship very quickly, because we both were able to clearly define our hard nose, what part of accounting that you wanted to do and you didn't want to do. So roles were very clearly defined, from the very beginning. You don't mind doing deliveries, but I'm not doing them more than 2 days a week, or, however that works. It's like very, very clearly defined. And then also having a plan. We were very clear up front, both coming from an entrepreneurial background, being involved in other business startups, knowing where the stresses were in those. We were very clear in how we were going to handle conflict, because obviously we were going to have it. When you're growing a business, things are going to arise. And so how are we going to handle it, and predefining for ourselves how we were going to handle when we didn't agree. How much of that does the team see? How are we handling this? What's happening behind closed doors, and what are we willing to openly talk about? And I think going into it, knowing where those boundaries were, has really set a tone that makes things easy. We don't have to be emotional about it. It's kind of that never go to sleep angry philosophy with the struggles that we've seen, not just the regulatory struggles, but a hurricane a week after we opened and forest fires 3 months later, and, watching literally 1/3 of the state that we were highly involved in, just be wiped off the map for months on end. Those are strains that you don't anticipate coming up. And if we hadn't predefined for ourselves, like how we were going to solve problems, even though we didn't know what the problems were, I think we would have been bickering at each other instead of being able to very clearly just sit down, map this out, come up with a strategy, and know how we were going to handle it so that we could be strong and be stable for our team.
How did it feel for you to see your team operate so smoothly while you were away on your first major buying trip?
I am the sales team leader. I am the one that's in the field the most. I'm coaching and working with the sales team every day. In 7 months, this is the first time that I'd left for more than 48 hours or a regular weekend. It was a big trip, and I think that's the first time that I felt very successful, because I could walk away. The team understood what was expected of them, and they performed very well. And I think that's that feeling where it's like, okay, this is actually going to work. I'm not going to have to live and breathe this forever. I don't have to hold all the pieces at once together. Like that first time where you don't feel like your hands are shaking, where it's like, okay, this is it. We've done it. We made the right decisions. The right people are in place, and they're able to handle it, and they're able to excel and do things that, I didn't think that they would even be possible or be capable of without even having to pick up the phone. So it's really refreshing and provided a much needed
There is an emotional relief there when you see them do the job you hired them to do without needing the guidance. I can remember a moment last summer when most of my team below me, they're newer in the industry, and they were all working out in the conference table, and I'm back here in my office, and I heard all the phones ring. And then I heard them just handling their customers. Nobody had to come ask me questions. And I was a proud mama back here.
I don't have children of my own, but I watch the mothers in my family and the mothers close to me. And I was like, it seems like the same emotion to me, but not having experienced it, you can make dinner for yourself. You can feed yourself. You can do this. And it's, no, it's, we have a wonderful team and we've really taken our time to put together a great team, but it's like that first taste of freedom where you know that the hard work was worth it. The nights that you're like, how are we going to get through this? Like, why do we just have to keep solving these problems and the same problems over and over again? Like for me, that first time being able to walk away and really just concentrate on the vineyards, concentrate on new products. Like I'm looking, it's like I'm looking at what's going to happen, in the fall going into next year and the wine that we'll have next year and not solving a current problem. And so that's a big taste of freedom for sure.
Joy, you also mentioned on our intro call that you have a passion for food access and revitalizing small downtowns. How do these causes intersect with your business?
I think that wine and the beverage industry, I mean, we concentrate on wine. We only deal in wine, but the beverage industry as a whole, especially when it comes to craft producers, they're a part of that. They're part of food access. They're part of revitalizing downtowns, especially in the Southeast and especially in our little portion of North Carolina. We have so many industries, manufacturing, textiles, furniture, massive conglomerate farming that in my lifetime, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, have moved out. They're just not here anymore. And so the lifestyle that generations one and two generations beyond me experienced, will not be there for my nieces and nephews. The industries just aren't the same. What we're seeing, in Charlotte and the neighborhoods that are springing up, in Lincolnton, in Shelby, in Gastonia, is that it's really important to repurpose these things, to repurpose these buildings that have been sitting for 20 years. And that what we're seeing come into them are hospitality-based industries. And so I think our business plays a huge part in that, because if we are going to keep those cultures stable, if we are going to help people understand where their food comes from, that beef is not grown in a styrofoam package that's wrapped. There's a farmer out there that has to raise a cow first, and the struggles that go into that, understanding what happens when it's ridiculously hot and humid, and how that's going to affect your tomatoes, and understanding where your food comes from, and that you can have a massive impact on small business, and it's kind of hidden because you don't think of farms as small businesses. You don't think of restaurants as small businesses in a lot of cases. And so just having access to something local and understanding the impact to the families around you, I think is really, really important. And we're a part of that. Like, I honestly feel like I picked my favorite product out of all of the hospitality industry to make that small business impact. It's like, if I have to concentrate all of my efforts into one product, what's it going to be? Wine would be the choice there.
What's one misconception people have about wine distribution that you wish you could clear up?
That it's not political. A lot of people think that it's, like when you think about wine distribution, or we say, we're a wine importer, we're a wine distributor, they're like, oh, you drink all day. Like your whole job is just to taste, or that your whole job is just to, have wine. And it's like, there's a lot of politics that people don't expect. I mean, there's like the importing side of it, working with importers, working with logistics companies. We like to joke around and say that we run two companies at the same time, because we have to run a delivery and logistics company to make sure that we can get things here from France, from Italy, from the port to our warehouse in Kings Mountain, and then from our warehouse to all of our customers across the state. That is a full-time logistics operation on top of a full-time sales operation on top of a branding company. So it really is three companies at once at times. And that's, the biggest misconception I would say in our world is that a wine sales representative just drinks all day, or that I have access to everything that I would ever want to, from the alcohol world. And that's really not how it is. It's much more logistics and politics than people would ever imagine.
What do you hope people will take away from hearing your story, especially younger entrepreneurs and founders?
Don't be afraid to do it. It took me 23 years in the industry before I was ready to do what I felt was missing. Don't be afraid to do it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be worth it. Just if you're truly that passionate about something, the way that I am, the way that Keith is about, these small producers and making sure that we can get them to market, find a way, because the support will show up. Even if you can't see it, if you're willing to take that chance and you're willing to talk about what it is that you want to do and the vision that you have, don't ever limit your vision because the people around you can't see it. If we had stopped everybody every time somebody told us that it's not going to work that way, or you can't just take small producers, you can't not do retail, you can't do these things. Like if we had stopped, we would have just crumbled. But the minute you're unwilling to give up, the support will show up.
And the idea that you have to have everything mapped out ahead of time is kind of, I don't know, silly. Because even if you do have it all mapped out, that's just not how life works. Life is going to throw you a curveball and you're going to have to figure it out. You may as well just identify the first step or two and then realize you'll figure out the next couple steps as you need to figure them out. Pop quiz. If you had to identify a book or a podcast or a YouTube channel that has been helpful to you as a business leader, would you share it with our listeners?
I'm a reader. I'm a reader for sure. So it's the books that get to me. And there's two of them that I come back to often. And when someone asks me for a recommendation about how to figure out what it is that they want to do or how they want to do it, these are the two that I would recommend. Gary Keller Williams, The One Thing is the name of the book, and Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Neither one of those are on that bookshelf, but they're both on my bookshelf. Especially the One Thing podcast. That's a great one. I'm always taking away things from that. So I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us today and tell us more about wine, but also about your business. Where can our listeners learn more about MainVine and connect with you?
We do have a website, MainVine.wine, Instagram and LinkedIn. And so we're on all three of those platforms. So you can find us all over.